AITA for refusing to let my husband's infertile friend name our son. My husband, M33's best friend, M37, Will, is infertile. He got divorced 2 times because of it, and because he lied and hid his infertility. And his life hasn't been the same the day he was told he can't have kids. He has always had a soft spot for children, and when he found out that my husband and I are expecting, he was so thrilled and started buying us gifts and decor pieces that he made from his woodwork for the baby. My husband thinks that those are all nice gestures, but I couldn't help but feel uncomfortable, especially with how much he keeps mentioning the baby. A few days ago, my husband and I found the gender of the baby. The minute we told Will, he started calling the baby a random name he picked and was going to give to his baby if he wasn't infertile. He then started begging us to use this name, and my husband said it was a done deal. I refused, but my husband called me heartless and asked me to do this one small, nice gesture for his struggling friend, to give him closure and honor him after all the things he has done for us. I flipped and said it's my baby, not his. Will heard this and left immediately. My husband yelled at me saying it's his baby too, and my behavior towards Will was aberrant. He left after him and didn't come back till the morning. He kept saying the same thing and pressuring me to agree on the name, but I refused. AITA for choosing this hill to die on. NTA mom and dad have rights to name the baby. Nobody else. Mom doesn't like a name? Doesn't get included in the list of potential names. Dad doesn't like a name? Doesn't get included in the list of potential names. Why is your husband picking a friend over his wife? That should be your concern here. Also, your husband is taught his friend needs therapy, not to pick baby names for closure. Your husband is actually a bad friend for entertaining this small thing to do? You are the one pregnant with this child, it is your baby. Who the hell says that for naming a whole human being? Why is your husband letting Will be like a second dad to his own kid? Unless the name is after a family member, perhaps, there shouldn't be a third person outside the couple when naming a kid. When naming a kid, both parents, just the parents, should agree on a name. It does not matter if Will is infertile or fertile. I'd honestly consider rethinking this marriage. It sounds like there are 3 people in this marriage, by the way your husband is with Will. Joking kind of, but holy crap, this is another level. The fact your husband is prioritizing his friend over you, his wife, is so concerning. NTA in the slightest bit. Edited because I misread something. I'm 32. I've had 4 miscarriages and 1 stillbirth. I didn't find out until after all 5 pregnancies that I can conceive but not carry. All around me, my friends are having children. I've never asked to name any of their children. Why? Because my infertility is neither their problems nor their baby's problems. Even with gifts, most of which I make, I ask my friends what they want. What do y'all need? What would y'all prefer? What are your favorite kids' cartoons which you'll introduce to your kids? Why? Because my tilted uterus has nothing to do with whether or not their kids will be watching Looney Tunes. There's overstepping, then there's overleaping, which is what deciding your sperm count will choose the name of another person's baby is. Honey, I am so sorry. I can't even begin to imagine a stillbirth. Sending you all the love. D.
NTA. Will is creepy as fuck and 100% will try to steal your baby.
AITA for being mad my husband ate without me. My husband took me out to a birthday dinner, my birthday. While we were waiting on the food, I saw an old co-worker and told my husband I wanted to go speak to them for a moment. While talking, I kept looking back towards our table to see if our food was out and to check on my husband. No food that I could tell. I'm super nearsighted, and he seemed to be reading something on his phone. I wrapped up the convo, may have been 10 to 15 minutes, only to come back to him finishing his food. I asked if he was done already, why didn't he let me know the food was out, etc., and he started saying he had small portions, didn't think it was a big deal, didn't want to interrupt my conversation, etc. I asked why didn't he motion towards me or something, he said he didn't think it would be a big deal for him to just eat. Now I understand what some may think about me walking over to speak to the former co-worker. It was a quick 10 to 15 minutes conversation and moving on. I even asked him if he minded if I went over and spoke to them for a few minutes because I had not seen them in quite some time. They are older. This wasn't a super fancy sit-down restaurant either, our budget was tight, so we went to Cracker Barrel. I feel like he could have at least let me know the food was out something. A little more context, we've been married 16 years, 2 teens, etc. Nothing like this has ever happened before.
AITA. Walking away for 15 minutes when you had food ordered and were supposed to be celebrating with your husband is way more rude than your husband eating his food while it was hot and fresh. You should be apologetic, not indignant. Exactly. 15 min feels like a long time when you're just sitting there all alone. Eat at it. I don't buy the 15 min either. Did he just inhale his food? I'm sure he had to wait a bit, and after it arrived he still had to finish the meal. Also kinda rude towards the coworker too. I know that if I'm out with people I wouldn't want to be interrupted by an acquaintance I haven't seen for some time. A quick hello, let's catch up sometime, have a nice evening is more than enough. AITA. It's rude to get up from dinner and have a conversation for 10 to 15 minutes and leave your husband sitting there. AITA. You went out to eat with your husband. He assumed you preferred to talk to someone else, so didn't bother you. He went there to spend time with you and have dinner. Since you decided against the first, he decided to go ahead and do the second. Unless she was eating alone, you were also rude to anyone else at her table. Thank you. This comment should be higher up. Wife pretty much saying her husband is boring to talk to. Exactly. Op was the rude one here. 15 minutes is not a quick convo, especially when out on a date. Op just expected this man to either eat cold food or awkwardly get her attention, instead just cutting her talk short. Instead, he politely sat alone, twiddling his thumbs since Op ditched him to go to talk to someone else, let her finish her convo, and then quietly ate his food. Also, agreed that Op may have been rude to the other party. There is nothing worse than trying to eat your food, and someone insists on having a conversation. Eat Op. AITA. Both to your husband and probably to the old coworker who likely just wanted to get on with their own meal and dining partnera. AITA for sending my son to school with less food and explicitly telling him not to share with his best friend. This situation began a year ago and blew up in our faces last week. My son Gregory is 13 years old. He just began the 8th grade. His friend Peter is also 13 and began the 8th grade too. Gregory and Peter have been friends since elementary school. Last year, I noticed that Gregory would be ravenously hungry after school every day. He would come home and eat a frozen dinner or something, and then help himself to seconds at dinner time. I chalked this up to him being a 12-year-old boy and let it be. Something about the situation was nagging at me though, and while Gregory wasn't clear about why at first, he eventually came clean. Peter was being sent to school every day with no lunch. It looks to me like a typical case of neglectful and unfit parents. The one time that Gregory went to their house, he came home with comments about it smelling really bad, and Peter's parents locking themselves in the garage for hours. Feeling bad for Peter, I decided to discreetly begin giving Gregory more food every day, just about doubling all his food. Over time I became less discreet and began packing a separate lunch for Peter. I was never thanked for this by anyone, but I knew Peter was eating the food I sent. This year, things are different. Money is tighter for personal reasons, and frankly with how expensive things are, I have decided not to spend exorbitant amounts of money supporting someone else's child. I sat Gregory down and told him that I would be packing him one lunch which is for him and him alone. I made it extremely clear. Do not share with anyone, and this includes Peter. Gregory followed my instructions until one day last week I got a phone call from Peter's mother. She was livid that I had cut Peter off without a single word. I asked her when it became my responsibility to feed her son, and she responded that if she had known I wasn't sending Gregory to school with too much food, she would have handled it herself. I asked if she remembered why I began sending him to school with 2 lunches in the first place, and she hung up on me. I feel conflicted. I know I'm having my kindness thrown back in my face, but did I approach the situation incorrectly? I'm thinking you're about 50-50s here. It's understandable that you can't take on the burden of feeding Peter. But you didn't mention that you contacted anyone at the school and made them aware of the situation. They have people who deal with this type of situation. That's the part of you that is AITA. I was thanking AITA for not having reported this to CPS already, but the school administration would be a good plan too. Especially when Op's son said the friend's parents locked themselves in the garage for hours. I was like, are they doing drugs in there? For sure, that's not a good environment for a child. School is always a good plan for parents who are unsure about getting involved with CPS. Teachers are mandatory reporters. I've called CPS many more times than I would have liked to in my career, and they have to act even if there's a suspicion of a problem, assuming this whole thing went down in the US. Can't speak to other countries. I hate to say AITA in this situation, but you are. Not for how you handled the mother, but because as far as Peter himself knows, you did cut him off without a word. He's the only one who suffered here. And while you're correct that it's not technically a responsibility, and your family absolutely needs to come first in terms of tighter finances, for any reason, yes, you did handle this incorrectly. I agree. You were kind and fed Peter a year. With a single lunch. But no notification to the school, where they would be mandatory reporters for suspected neglect. You also didn't consider this child was only fed once a day by you. What about breakfast and dinner for a grown child in weekends, holidays, school breaks? You did not tell anyone. Then you suddenly cut it off without any warning to your son and Peter. Only an A would do that to a child who was counting on them. Sure, his mom called and was nasty. But tell someone who will help him.